That's okay. Yum. You don't eat chocolate. You don't drink tea or coffee. That's fair enough. That's fair enough. You don't have to. Right.
I just got my dog treat, you know, my little dog. $85.
At least it wasn't 100. At least it wasn't 100. Yeah.
$85.
Yeah. That's about right.
It was 45, then it went to 55, now $85.
That's about right.
And there's a big sign up in there that says, please make sure your dogs are well out of the way of chocolate.
Oh, they're not allowed to eat. They're not allowed to eat chocolate,
So
are
I
they?
tell Vernon when I give her a chocolate, she doesn't leave any laying around.
Okay. I think we might get started. We might. So we've had an apology from Councillor Shanks and Councillor Hughes, and I can see that Jim's not here, so I haven't heard anything from Jim, so I'm assuming he's not coming. Firstly, I'd like to welcome councillors and staff, Susie and Sharon, to this briefing session, which will assist to inform the Town of Gawler submission and response to questions in the Local Government Participation and Elections Review discussion paper. I'd also like to acknowledge this land that we gather on today is the traditional lands for the Kaurna people, and that we respect their spiritual relationship with their country. We also acknowledge the Kaurna people as the custodians of the Greater Adelaide region, and that their cultural and heritage beliefs are still as important to the living Kaurna people today. So I had a meeting with Jack Buckskin today. We're having a workshop on learning Kaurna language, and it's specifically around the dual naming of our parks, but he'll also provide other opportunities for us to learn Kaurna language. He's very busy, but he always makes time for Gawler, so I think that's really lovely. This session will be used solely for the purpose of information sharing and not for the purpose of debating issues, building consensus positions, or otherwise discharging Council's deliberative and decision-making function. There is no set agenda and no minutes will be taken during this session. I remind members that tonight's session must not deal with a matter in a way that it obtains or effectively obtains a decision on a matter outside of a formally constituted council or council committee meeting. So I'm going to turn, my phone is off. If you need to take a phone call, please take it outside. If you can turn your phones to silent, that would be quite useful. So Susie, are you going to start? I'll hand over to you then.
Thank you, Mayor Redman, and good evening, councillors. I uploaded to the hub, for those of you who have the laptops here and access via the hub, the discussion paper that tonight's session relates to. It was released by Minister Brock. He sort of launched the consultation phase, and the submissions are being managed and the engagement is being managed by the Office of Local Government. And the Minister has extended the submission deadline. by about a month. So instead of being the 1st of March, he's extended it to the end of the month. So we did consider at the meeting on the 23rd of January this discussion paper, and given the timeframes, we were saying we needed to have a session, and staff, based on that information session, would go away and write a submission and authorise the Mayor and CEO to finalise the submission no later than the 1st of March. So the next Ordinary Council meeting is the 26th. It is possible, even given that resolution, that if members wanted to see a draft based on feedback that's provided tonight, that we could get it to that meeting. Still the authorisation aspect of that resolution is enacted, in that the Mayor would be as the principal member, the signatory to that submission, and that would then get lodged via the new submission deadline. Interestingly enough, the LGA was not able to extend their deadline for their feedback to inform a sector response because of when their board meetings are scheduled and the deadlines associated with the preparation of agendas for their meetings. So different responses and feedback from the questionnaires that were emailed out. There were some responses where there was agreement with the staff response, some responses where there was agreement with some minor work changing to wording, but no alteration to the overall intent of the response. It might be to replace some words with some different words. There was some responses provided with additional feedback or differing viewpoints, which is, a good thing, shows that people have really considered the matter. And there were others where there was just no response. So the questions from the discussion paper that I've covered in the slides tonight are those where there was additional feedback or a difference in opinion compared to the staff submission or the administration submission that you would have received in your agenda papers and you considered at the 23rd of January meeting. That's not to say that if there are other thoughts that you have about the discussion paper that you can't, information sharing is what we're here to do, so share your viewpoints on that. I'm not sure how many of you have read the discussion paper, but I found it quite interesting in that the community engagement charter was sort of tacked in the front, and it was a little bit confusing in that the participation in elections, they didn't seem to marry well together. However, for those who are not new this term, you would know that the draft community engagement charter, I think, was prepared by the LGA, and the Mayor would probably know this better than me, sometime back in 2021. And I think that it hadn't really progressed, so maybe this was a good opportunity to actually bring that to the forefront.
Is this the questions that you raised, that you identified that were different to the staff response? Is that the one?
No, so this is the survey that we sent out. So we divided it up into two sections, two different documents. The first section, the blue section, is the topics on the community engagement. So what we basically did is put into that spreadsheet the questions that are sort of, you've got to read through the discussion paper to pick out those questions. They're not and then we did the elections review topics in a separate one, just sort of so that...
Right, okay, okay.
Yep. So I'll head on to the first question, and we've got, I've included Councillor Hennessy, your feedback here. So this is about requirements that should be set for councils regarding what requirements should be set for councils' community engagement and for what decisions. So Councillor Hennessy gave her view on the staff response, and that's entirely appropriate. Is there any other feedback or comments about that we can take on board to work into a draft submission from the council?
Any comments, elected members? Well, I'll ask for somebody else. We've got your comments up there, Helen. So we'll ask for somebody else. If no one else is... Anybody else want to make any comment? Deputy Mayor?
I think one of the issues around council community engagement is I think there are some things that, I don't know, I question whether they should be going to community engagement or what response they expect to receive on when it comes to...
Can you give an example?
So just like technical matters, like there have been we get a bunch of ones that get no responses because obviously they don't want to read a long technical document, you know.
Okay, so, okay. Any other comments? And then I'll go to Councillor Hennessy. Any other comments? No?
Thank you. I think I know where you're coming from, Deputy Mayor, but if you remember on the spectrum of community engagement, inform is at one end and, you know, there's 5 other steps. I think informing people just leaves it up to them whether they want to read and respond. I think it is still bound to us that we make an effort, we abide by the community engagement charter to come and make sure that we are informing. I mean, it is a huge amount of information that we're putting out. I can type of understand when the public comes from. My concern comes, and I am trained in community engagement, is that what we're saying in this feedback still we keep referring to legislated and community engagement, which comes out of planning, basically. And I'm wondering why we make a difference between that. I don't think the public has that differentiation between what we legally have to do and what we don't legally have to do. We're either committed to community engagement or we're not, from my point of view. So I just balked at those two, at the terms of legislated and non-legislated. Sure, some of the stuff we legally have to do, but... yeah.
So how would you reword it?
I would just take the words from being either a legislated or non-legislated. That's from the sentence. Take that out.
So you take non-legislated and legislated. You take them out.
I just. Sorry, my phone's gone.
So the goal of the engagement process being either public consultation or community engagement. That makes sense.
Well, yeah.
What Councillor Hennessy is saying is that she wants the words legislated and non-legislated removed. Process being either a public consultation or community engagement.
And then community engagement is
and where non-legislative, so you could also get rid of where non-legislative community engagement is required. There should be a flexible best practice approach tailored to the scope and complexity. So you get rid of the other.
Yeah, I think and I know it's minor points, but I think it tones it down. I'm very much aware that what we send in as behalf of the town of Gawler may end up in the public realm, and I'm trying to make it appear when I'm trying to have it so that our community sees our ongoing commitment to open and continuous community engagement.
Yep. Susie?
Just in relation to that, and I will say that it was, I think, some of the members of the team here under David Barrett who are the experts in the community engagement specific responses. But one of the reasons I think potentially they've talked about that legislative public consultation is in the Act there are still a few documents that do require public consultation where it specifies what some steps need to be. I think that's in relation to and it ties in with your comment, Deputy Mayor Davies, that the access to meetings and meeting documents, as in the confidentiality requirements, is one of those that has to go out to public consultation and often gets minimal feedback, or the feedback is not
but
possible.
I think you can take out legislated and non-legislated. It still makes sense.
Yes.
And I think that from what Councillor Hennessy's saying, it makes it easier to read.
Absolutely. So
I don't think it matters.
No.
Staff will always look at the legislation and you know, do what it says in the legislation. However, we don't need to put that in.
Yep.
I don't think.
No.
I don't think we need to be quite that pedantic.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Okay. In relation to live streaming of meetings and whether the council should be required to live stream their meetings and make recordings available. So I've just bullet pointed the response, so it's a little bit the staff response. Talked about the use of technology becoming the norm during COVID-19 and members of the public being able to access the live streaming or a recording or both of a meeting. And I guess that from a staff's perspective, I can see that increased community expectations about that. I do know that there has been some councils where, you know, significant expenditure, and, you know, we've got some fairly fancy equipment here too, where the technology and equipment required to facilitate participation electronically, but also a good streamed product for members of the public to view can be costly. And I just incorporated in the staff response some of the feedback, I guess, from my governance counterparts that are from smaller, more regional councils who don't have, I guess, the budgets necessarily. So that's where I was coming from with the staff response, not necessarily, just thinking about some of that feedback. But 100%, if people have got things to add, I'll make sure, to put in from a Town of Gawler response. In addition to Councillor Hennessy, who's said that that the Town of Gawler response should be yes, council should be required to live stream their meetings and make recordings available.
Yeah, well, we're talking about from a Town of Gawler perspective, not anybody else.
Okay. Yep.
Councillor Solomon.
With that one, to me, if it was going to say that there should be a requirement, I think we need to be careful that the government wouldn't legislate that in such a way that it could be interpreted as there is a right on behalf of community members to have access to that live stream no matter what, because then we might run into issues where we have a technical error. We don't want someone to be able to go to the legislation and sue us for not enabling them to have that right. So if it was going to be mandatory in some way, I think it should be something along the lines of seek to do that rather than mandate that it is available the whole time, just to protect councils in there. And you can work in things like reasonable measures to stream, as opposed to a right to have access to the live stream.
So you could put change to yes. Anything else makes access to council meetings inequitable and highly dependent on the location and size of your council. Councils may require some financial assistance to meet this requirement. You could put anything else makes access to council meetings inequitable and highly dependent on the location and size of your council.
You could say something like insofar as is practicable for
Yeah,
the
so you could
council.
put with the word may or
Yeah.
something like that in, highly dependent on the location and size of your council. Anything else makes access to council meetings inequitable. Yeah. Councils may require some financial assistance to meet this requirement. I can't think of anything else to say there.
I understand the concerns about legislative requirements, but I think that could be written into the requirement. When I was reading this, my thought went to another question that comes afterwards about when councils should be allowed to hold their meetings. And we've said, you know, it's up to each council. You get over that if you then if you have a live stream. So it doesn't matter if you're in light and you meet between 9 and 5, so long as your citizens have the ability to be able to sit down and watch at a time that suits them. But that won't work unless we get get councils moving this way. The majority of councils did go online during the COVID period, and I have friends and family who are working in some of the more remote councils in this state, and they are trying very hard to get to that point. It has an impact on the budget, like it has an impact on our budget, and so that's why I put in the suggested thing about, heaven help us, the state government might have to put some funding into it to enable that. So I'm not going to die by it, but I certainly in my own submission will put that in, but that was my thinking behind it. It's been successful. It's been quite a learning process for us, and the technicalities have been challenging, I agree. But it's now actually really useful for our community. You can send them a link to the agenda. You can send them a link to the YouTube. For people who don't have time or let most of what we do pass by them, it's really helpful. And I've had 2 people say, is that for all council meetings? And will that stay up forever? So we're still, there's still people learning. I just think it's such a valuable resource.
I might ask if there's any other comment, Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, look, I agree that we should be saying, yes, council should be required to live stream their meetings and make recordings available. I was the one that moved the motion to make recordings available at Gawler Council, so I just think there is a cost on lavish ones, but the actual cost, when COVID came in and every council was required to do it, they all set it up for $50 with a webcam at the end of the, all of that kind of stuff is stuff that you can do with a phone and an internet connection these days for the most basic level of being able to hear the audio and all that kind of thing. Obviously, if you want to have cameras that zoom in on individual people and all this sort of thing, that's going to escalate the price, but those are optional parts. I mean, some councils may want to consider it because it increases the level of engagement, but I don't think that's a required part of it. Just that the recordings be made available is, I think, the most important part.
Okay, I think that's okay. Next, right. Training sessions and workshops to enhance communication and engagement skills for members to engage more effectively with the community would support members. Resources including clear direction for members will provide guidance and reference material as appropriate, provision of safe meeting spaces for members to meet with community members, opportunity for members to be included in council community engagement sessions. Any other comments? We do have safe meeting spaces.
And we do, and I think that's why I thought we should promote that.
Yeah, so there's rooms, in the town hall that you can book, and you can have meetings with community members. Opportunities for members to be included in council community engagement sessions. Sometimes training sessions are important to be able to get briefed on a whole range of things. Community engagement sessions is something a little bit different training sessions, we're being taught to, you know, like, for example, conflict of interest or legislative requirements for council members. I'm not sure that many people would be interested in that, although they could be. Opportunities for members to be included in council community engagement sessions. So you could have separate community engagement sessions, and we've done a couple of those. Yeah.
What do you mean by safe? I mean, I've been at community engagement meetings where people have been quite aggressive and withdrawn.
No, sorry, they're separated. Maybe I should have put them in two different points. To explain myself, when I read this first, I thought, there's a bit of me that, so there's an assumption that in what's been said that elected members aren't good at community engagement, and yet we've all been voted in to represent people. So, but I toned that down and thought, okay, what is it we do well here? And part of our induction was, you know, if you need to have space, and I have used several of them, I've used open space to deal with unhappy residents, is what I'm thinking. So that was one, so leave that aside, I think we all know that. And it's been very useful to meet with people who are agitated in the Civic Centre, for example, rather than at home. Yeah. The second point, maybe I have not explained myself, probably not, is the way you learn how to engage is to watch people who are good at it. And we're very fortunate in this council, we've got some staff who are very good at it. So I guess that's what I was trying to say, rather it's a different form of training, watching people or being mentored by people who've done it. You really don't know what you don't know until you watch somebody who's really good at it. And for those of you who've been at some of the playground things, that's good. That is really good, the staff who are doing our playgrounds consultation. So that's what I meant. I'm not dying in a ditch over it, that was just my thought process.
Okay, any other comments? Do you have any comments, Paul?
Just, it gets back to having a physically safe environment as well. We had one case where we had to report someone to the police who, you know, Brian, you know. We've had other cases where people have been overly abusive and potentially violent. You know, so.
There are ways of dealing with that.
Oh yeah, it is, but when you've got a room full of them.
Yep. When you've got a room full of people who've been burnt out, Paul, happens.
No, it's just.
I know.
No, it's
No, very confronting, and there's training that you get, absolutely, as it says. I thought if that's where the training is, to have people are aware of the strengths and pitfalls, that's very good. That is exactly how we should have training. Rather than, because we're not good at it, we need to understand that it's a skill set that we need to find.
Okay, any other comments? Yep, Ethan.
Thanks, Mayor. I was just probably would like to hear Councillor Solomon maybe be able to talk to your comment regarding the your thoughts on the increase in salary of the Mayor. I think it's an interesting comment. Yeah, are you happy to kind of talk about it a little bit more?
Oh, we haven't moved down to that yet.
Oh, sorry.
No, we're still on the one
Gotcha.
above it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll leave it there if there's.
Okay. So you want to move down? Yep. So, Councillor Solomon, I think there is potentially room for an increase in the salary of the Mayor and the inclusion of superannuation. Oh, yeah, no, superannuation has to be, especially for the Mayor who's largely unable to work due to the time commitment of their role. Staff response, potentially, although it would be dependent on the increase, Council acknowledges that many candidates nominate for election to Council to serve the community, to have a say and make decisions that impact and benefit the area, to gain experience and to learn new skills. The allowance payable does not constitute a salary as such and is more of an honorarium type payment. Well, we need to move away from that. We need to move away from that. In the eastern states, mayors get superannuation. They get quite a bit more than what we get here. I've had to cut down and work 2 days a week because the role of the Mayor is 24/7, and I work on weekends, and I'm more than happy to do that. And I know Brian was more than happy to do that as well, but it if we're looking at strategic planning for local government, you know, the role of the mayor is now, you're a chief spokesperson, you work with staff, with the media statements, you make sure that they're on the money, and sometimes we get outside help because of some controversial subject, and that's okay. I think that's important to do that, because sometimes people, like Communicate, for example, they are very, very good at writing media statements. And we've had previous, I can't remember her name. Anyway, there was somebody else who was also very good, and that helps you understand and use different words to explain things. And I think that working with staff, you have to be available. So I'm available during my work day. I get texts and I then ring in my breaks. I look at my emails in my breaks so that I'm not out of touch with everything else. And it is a 7-day-a-week job. And and you do it because you love doing what you do for your community. However, I think elected members also need superannuation. You know, I think that because when I was an elected member, I worked full time, and I also did this full time, and it's quite a lot. It's quite a lot. So, and I know that a lot of you have outside interests, and you do it in your spare time, and I think that superannuation should be for all elected members. Yeah, I'll go to Deputy Mayor and then Sharon.
Yeah, I think in general the honorarium or whatever system is sort of leads to a few holes that just make it so that, you know, for example, if you fracture your ankle at the admin centre,
you can't get an ambulance.
You have to pay $1,000 for an ambulance because you're not covered.
Well,
Because you're not an employee, you're not really here or there, you're not really anything.
I actually raised that with other mayors, and they were shocked and horrified that that you weren't covered for an ambulance. And I think that's not right. It's not right.
And I think part of that is that, yeah, we're just in a weird situation where we're not employees and we're not anything definitive, and we don't get paid, and so we don't get superannuation or, you know, I mean, if you're going to just have an honorarium, I don't know, maybe it should be tax exempt or something, you know, like it's. My mayor's role is my second job. I pay extra tax. Yeah.
Extra tax.
And yeah, there are people who I've talked to about running for council that say, oh, well, that will bump me above tax brackets and things, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I just think and even you know, of course people nominate for election to serve the community, but I think that language can be used in a, I don't know, weaselly kind of way for, you know, artists or whatever hear it a lot of, oh, don't you do it for the love of the art? It's like, well, they also love to be able to pay the rent and, you know, eat and all of those other things, you know. So you can't just say, oh, well, you're doing it because you enjoy it. You know, you have to get paid for the work that you put in.
Look, I think we all do it because we love it, and we are invested in our communities, and that's not to be underestimated. However, there needs to be proper reimbursement for your time, and I think that's coming. I think that is coming. Yeah.
I think you probably do need to, because it does limit the people who can actually be councillors and mayors.
Yeah.
Who
Yeah.
Like in my situation, I've got a small business. I spend like 2.5, 3 days a week, each week on council stuff. So that means that limits on how much I can spend on my business.
Yeah.
So there's a real
Yeah.
trade-off.
Yeah. Well, I'm up at 11 o'clock at night reading my emails.
So time I should spend.
I can't keep up with my emails, and I can't remember when I get an email because I have to keep on top of that. I get a shitload of emails. Yeah. Yes.
I've got no issues with that as well. It allows the person that wants to go to the role to be actually fully committed into the role.
Yeah.
And try to have the balance, the same balance having two jobs
Yeah.
to be able to maintain and support yourselves
Yeah.
as well. It is a very valuable role, at least being the first as such.
Yeah. Look, it's not going to be easy to get superannuation, but yeah, that needs to be legislated, I think, and yeah, it is a 24-hour day. You know, I'm on call all the time, and I get calls at 6 o'clock in the morning, I get calls at 8 o'clock at night, I get emails at, midnight. I'm not awake at midnight, I go to bed. And I get really good night's sleep, but you have to look after yourself, and you have to have time away from it, but you also need to look after yourself and make sure that your head's in the right space, and etc. And you also need support from staff, because if you don't have support from staff, you're sort of on your own. So, Councillor Hennessy?
Yeah, I tend to agree with what's being said, but I was going to suggest that we add some wording that looks about if we're serious about increasing participation in local government in terms of attracting a broader range of elected members, then I suggest that they would actually need to do a review of the whole payment system, moving it away from the idea of an honorarium into more realistic and attractive. So it's actually to pull it back a bit and then review, because I think you're right. I think honorarium's almost leaving the room, and I'd be very interested to see what they do in other states as well. Not accepting super is actually a real...
They get super in the
Yeah.
eastern states. In Brisbane and New South Wales, they get super.
But while with respect, I understand the mayor's role is big. I think it's the same. And here you go, I'm going to talk on behalf of women. Women can't afford to let super go mid-career. They've got some other problems. There's a whole pile of stuff. It would be an active disincentive for people. If it sits there, then I think we would start to find younger people, women, just going, okay, I don't need to stop in mid-career, I don't need to put things aside, because, they've got things like, care, they might have to organise babysitting and the whole range of stuff. So they're already spending the allowance on that type of thing. I don't think people should be put in a situation where they have to put their savings, their superannuation on hold for 4 years. So I just... Happy with what Councillor Solomon said, but I actually think we should ask or encourage a broader, more holistic review of the whole situation.
So an extra point of an overarching review of the salaries of all council members. I think it's not just the mayor. It's council members. So overarching review of the honorariums to council members, including the idea of super. And I think, well, that's already covered, but I think that council members should also be included in that, because if you stop, if you don't work for 4 years, if you're doing this full time, you don't get super. You lose super, and the average super for a woman is under 100,000.
Maybe we could ask for it to be aligned with well, a state government and non-for-profit boards, and you get payment and you get super in those. The amount is determined depending on the scope of the board, but I think we act more now as a board than we do as a group of volunteers.
Yeah, I think that it's become more of a... I'll come to you, Councillor Solomon, very shortly, and I think it's become more... You just have to read so much. You have to have your head around everything. And it's become a lot more legislative. It's become a lot more... You need community engagement experience, you need all of those different kinds of things, and it's become a lot more complex, and I think that, so I'm going to go to you now, Councillor Solomon.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, so I guess when I wrote that as well, it was, I was being quite conservative with it, I guess, because I was thinking, there's probably not a big appetite from the state government to do that, but I agree with what a lot of other people have said. I think that superannuation point, that is just, it's been said that if we're expecting not just this council but other councils, a mayor to be going out and actively engaging with the community during the day, attending events and doing those kind of things, they're obviously going to have to forego work in order to do that. If we're saying councillors should be doing that as well, they're going to have to forego work in order to do that. And that, looking at the question there about diversity, the earlier on in your career that you are sacrificing super, the bigger impact it has, because it's those early years that you see that growth, because it's compounding interest. And so automatically that says the younger you are, and we know which way super skews, as Councillor Hennessy said. We know, that specific industries, particularly female-dominated industries as well, and so there's an obvious issue with diversity there, where you're saying you can't have any super. It was interesting, Deputy Mayor Davies, Councillor Hennessy and I were at a history talk last year, and I think it was 50s, 60s, they're having conversations about state parliament salaries, and they said, people should want to do it because, they're representing their community, and, they should just have the goodwill to be able to go there and do it, and if we give wages to members of parliament, we'll get all these undesirables who will come in, and which is a ridiculous argument, and that's not that long ago. I think people who I've talked to are sort of genuinely surprised that, you say on council, when I talk to people, I was in that role, of course, at the uni where I was the uni president. I get paid more for that than I do for council, but also, with council, you get taxed, but you don't get superannuation.
No.
And it's and so you get the worst of all worlds. And I think moving forward, a review of that you can have an honorarium and have super as well. I think we need to be careful in that sense that an honorarium provides that kind of flexibility where it's not restricted to hours, and like you have those sort of workplace laws, like we just had some laws passed around contact outside of hours. This is not necessarily a role where you can do that, so we need to be careful about structuring it in a way which could be interpreted as employment, because then those employment laws come into effect. In the same vein, we're talking about writing a piece of legislation here, and the state government has the power to write a piece of legislation which is nuanced about this. So I think as well, there could be an expectation that councillors work more. I think there's more work. There's always more work that can be done here, but if that's going to be the case, then they should get fair pay for it. So I think we need to find that right balance in there somewhere. But I think what Councillor Hennessy said, a holistic sort of review of this, because I don't think it's actually going to be answered in this one question that's come in this review. I think it has to be if they wanted to consult on that, they would have to look at schemes, like said myself, Mayor, in the eastern states, etc.
Yeah, you look at what's happening in other parts of Australia, and you see that in the eastern states, in Brisbane, or in Queensland and in New South Wales, they get super. They get super, and you know, the mayors get quite a bit more than what we do here. And I think you're right, because if we want to attract a more diverse group of people to put their hand up to come on council, we have to give them super. We have to pay them accordingly, because they're going to be late at night or during the day, and it takes up a lot of time. You know, I spend 20, 25, 30 hours every week, looking at emails, you know, all of those things. I can't keep up with my emails. I don't even remember what I get, because I have to make sure that I've covered off on all of the emails. And when you're mayor, you have to respond to people. You can't not respond. So you have to do that. Sharon, you want to make a comment?
Yeah, I was just sort of in relation to the questions on allowances and superannuation. Yes, the eastern states do it, but effectively they do it through their allowance, so it's not on top. So the Remuneration Tribunal actually sets their allowances inclusive, because I don't think that while the state legislation or the SA Remuneration Tribunal can make that determination in the sense of paying super on allowances also needs a change. If you're doing it in the way of the allowance plus super, whatever that percentage is, under the current structure, you also actually require a change of the federal legislation of the superannuation laws, which effectively the federal government's not going to do. So it is that question of next time that I suppose the remuneration is subject. It's that point in time where the lobbying should actually be done to sit there and say, actually, the allowances should incorporate the equivalent of the superannuation guarantee in that allowance stuff. So,
Councillor Solomon.
Just a quick question on that. Do you know, Sharon, whether it's incorporated in such a way that it still meets the normal tax threshold, or whether it's separate? Because obviously there's like an average 20% difference between a voluntary contribution coming out of an allowance and something going straight into your super. So do you know how they get around that, or?
no, I don't know that, but I'm just doing a bit of Google, and it's to sit there and say that the allowance is inclusive. So I suspect what's actually happening is to sit there and say that the value of the allowance that is actually being paid to you is effectively inclusive of that super, and then you can request that to actually be paid, that government guarantee component to be paid into your superannuation fund, as opposed to you taking it as an allowance.
So
well, if it's super guarantee amount, effectively going into your yes. So obviously it's still subject to your super, so you're still subject to the limits of what your contribution rate versus. So if you're all your contributions to super, if it's still below the maximum reasonable benefits limit, it's still taxed at the same rate. It's just if you go over.
yeah, so I get taxed as a second job. That's how I get taxed, and it's more tax. So, so we might put council members. Oh, sorry, Brian.
Thank you, Mayor Karen. Being an oldie and being mayor, back when I was mayor, which seems like a long time ago, but the allowance was $42,000. It's now doubled. And that sort of thing. And it's very interesting to hear the conversations that are going on, because I'm so very conscious of the young people that we've now got on council, which is of so much value to the future, and especially the positive ideas that come out from these young ones and that sort of thing. But you will probably notice, or as some people are saying, how come you're not coming to the handovers? Because I've been around for a bloody long time, I get invited to all the club's handovers because I was very actively involved. And out of that $42,000 that was my allowance, I religiously paid for every meal I went to at a handover. So many of the clubs said, no, you're a special guest. I said, no, I get an allowance and I'm going to pay what Mick pays to come to this handover. I'm not sure whether it still is the same thing, but I did it. And after a couple of years, or maybe to when I went for the second term, my wife and my accountant said, do you know, Sambo, you love being mayor, don't you? Yeah. Do you know it's costing you? It's really costing you, because there's no way in the world that with your hours and everything you do, so forth down the line. Now I'm back on council, I have not been to a handover dinner, and I've been invited to every one of them. I think the last time a couple didn't send me one because I'd say no. The reason I say no, it's over $100 to go to a handover dinner.
Yeah, it is.
You know, the meals aren't at McDonald's meals anymore, you know. And for these young people to go to that with the allowance of $450 that we get as an elected member is a little bit, in a way, a joke and doesn't fit. Now, if you've got plenty of money, it doesn't matter, like Paul. No, I didn't say that, did I, Paul? But what's his name? This year, we were hit with a bombshell because we've just done our tax, and our tax accountant we met with the other day, they said, oh, bad luck, Sambo. The government's taken away. I'm sorry, but Sharon probably know what this is called. I don't, because I can't remember these things. I just say, oh, I hate the government because of it. I have to pay $1,000 tax now because of my allowance.
Yeah.
$1,000 for the money that I get to be an elected member and so forth. It's now going to cost me $1,000 a year.
Yeah, that's right.
And it's some special thing that the government have now taken away. I'm sorry, Sharon, to put on your spot. Do you know the name of it? But
Okay.
My wife knows. Yeah. And I said, you're kidding me? And he said, no. He said, that's the way it is because the government has now taken that away. So, you know, like, I love what I'm doing and all that sort of stuff, but when you consider, I want to see the young ones go to the handover dinners, and I want to see that they go to meetings and training sessions and all. They have to pay for their vehicle and for their fuel, which incidentally went up 44 cents today, you know, and all this sort of stuff, and this is going to keep happening. Oh, electric vehicles, no.
Keep going.
But anyway, what I'm saying is the other part about it is dress clothing. If I went to a handover dinner in my farm clothes, everybody'd say, have a look at that poor old bastard, you know, and so forth. So to look beautiful all the time, you have to have good clothing. Yeah, you have to have good boots. You have to polish your head, all that sort of stuff.
Polish your head?
And, oh, well, I've got a chrome dome.
Who polishes their head?
No.
Oh.
But what I mean is that certainly I believe, and Mayor Karen, as I know what she's doing and being involved in the community, and I agree with Councillor Solomon, that it has to be looked at. And I can't help but think, this lovely lady that was a write-up in the paper the other day, and I've spent many hours talking to her and everything, she's just been given an embarrassment. $140,000 extra. And her total, just to be with everything provided, chauffeur, hairdressers, you name it, is now $650,000 to be our icon in our community.
She's coming.
And I say, that's fantastic.
She's coming here.
Oh, well,
yeah.
Is she paying away? But what I'm saying is that we've got to be realistic, and I hear Councillor Solomon and Councillor Hennessy and everybody saying, but we're living in a different world now to when I was actively involved in it. I think probably the thing that people are saying to me, you know, you're going always on meetings, you know, how many meetings you got this week? Then a certain lady puts Saturday meetings in, you know, without any cream cakes at the end, you know, and the other thing I'll just finish off with, last week we had a fantastic event about a huge development in this community for sporting, for young people and everything, the whole lot. There was a fantastic story in the Bunyip, which we pay a fortune every week to keep producing it, about this event. Councillor White and I attended it, because I took the Mustang out for a drive to show off, you know.
It was a very nice Mustang.
Yeah, no dents, you know. But what's his name? And there we were, standing there, and that lovely lady over here,
Wendy.
had this marquee, everything, the lot, beautiful cakes. I took photos of them so I can show you a photo of these beautiful cakes that were made. What are they called? They had a baseball.
Yeah. Beautiful, beautiful. There was softball, baseball and soccer.
Yeah, sorry, Glenn, but I need to say this. And there was Councillor White and I. The Mayor gave a first-class speech. You can pay me later. Member for Light always gives a passionate speech. He was great. And I was standing next to this big tall bloke, and I said to him, "Oh, hang on, I'm Sambo," and that sort of thing. "What are you?" He said, "I'm the head of the baseball club of South Australia."
Yeah, he
oh.
He came
I said,
along.
"Oh,
He
you're
came
a big
along.
wig, so you're going to give a
Fantastic.
speech?" And he said, "No," and that sort of thing.
Tony Catt was his
Yeah.
name. Yeah.
And anyway, that was there and so forth. And he said, "Where's the public? Don't they know about this?" I don't know about you, Ethan. I was really embarrassed for Wendy, for her two staff members that were there, for Mayor Karen, Tony, and everybody there. One member of the public. And I was listening before about, I think, Councillor Hensley or somebody. How do we get the community back to understanding what we're doing and what we're trying to do for our community? And sadly, don't buy a bunyip this week. The front page of the bunyip this week, as far as I'm concerned, is the most insulting thing that they have ever done about our finances. Look, surely if you've seen it, you know what I mean. And honestly, I could have rang the bunyip, but I would have got into trouble.
Deputy Mayor shared it.
Eh? But what I mean is, how do we, as people that are sincere and dedicated to serving our community, I mean, Councillor Hennessy, I am fascinated with the way you have got involved, and this is your first term on, and that sort of stuff. But you probably haven't checked whether you're getting paid enough, but things like that. But what I mean is, we've got to be recognised, not somebody that's criticised. I can tell you, my phone's already started, I'm not even opening them. And it's all going to be about the big story on the front page of the paper that we pay for half of it. And somehow or other, we have to turn this around. You know what I mean? But it doesn't seem to, we don't seem to be doing anything, especially after, when was it, last Saturday? Last Saturday's event out there, how embarrassed I felt. The other thing, finally, when I was talking to this big head honcho of baseball, I said to him, "I'm really disappointed because when I was mayor, a long time ago now, there was two people came to me as mayor, and one was Barry O'Brien, a famous photographer, and the other one was Robert Laidlaw, who was one of the editors in the paper. They were the one that started the wheels turning on Cal Beaver. And you know what he said to me? Yes, he said, "I know that. How come they're not here?" So, you see, we've got a little bit of a problem with communication, haven't we? You know, this is the official opening of this magnificent sporting complex. And the two people that basically put the battery in the car and turned the key weren't even there. So, somehow or other, we've got to look, and I don't believe we're getting the publicity that we honestly deserve, that this council honestly deserve. And so I think I've talked enough, but I needed to tell you that because from now on, for the next 3 years, I'm going to be paying $1,000 tax, and I haven't paid tax for the last 10 years. I'm not shonky, but I just haven't paid tax for the last 10 years. But sadly, there's got to be some changes.
I pay a shitload of tax.
Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Brian. Any other comments, Paul? Yep.
Elected members can put in, if they've got an expense,
Yeah,
they can actually
yeah.
get refunded. Like
Yeah.
childcare, and get childcare refunded.
Yeah, you get 80 cents a kilometre.
Yeah, your car, other bits and pieces,
80
printing,
cent.
whatever, telephone stuff. But historically...
You only get 80 cents a kilometre.
Yeah, that's the car. But historically, other councils do it all the time. Historically, Gawler councils don't do it. That's just something that we've never done
Yeah.
forever, really. But other councils do it. They actually put in claims for their expenses.
So I'm going to add.
If you had a child, you could.
To Councillor Solomon's
like,
comments.
for example, I think Cody you get taxis, for example. So Cody's got money back for taxis because he hasn't got a car. So you can actually put in, so don't think you can't.
I don't put in anything.
No, but historically people don't. We don't usually do it here. That's all. That's all I'm saying.
I think we need to add council members should be included in superannuation and an overarching review of council member and mayor's allowances, and including superannuation. Yeah. So we'll just add that. So we'll move up.
Can we just go back to the previous one? I'm just thinking about that last one.
Sorry.
To clarify about opportunities for members to be included in community engagement sessions as a learning opportunity, or just a phrase at the bottom, maybe that will make it, at the end, might make it clearer. Thank you.
Okay. So we'll move up. You've got that down, Susie? Lovely. Okay. Are there elements of council business that might put people off nominating? For example, if a council meets during business hours, does that prevent people from standing for council if they're in the workforce or have family or other? Does it enable others who may not be able to attend evening meetings to run for council? Timing of council meetings may have an impact on some, but the workload associated with the role of a council member, in addition to other commitments such as paid employment, family commitments, study and other responsibilities, would have more impact on preventing people from nominating to stand for council. Add in, reduce the ability of unreasonable and vexatious complainants to target specific elected members deliberately and repeatedly. Yeah. Yep, Councillor Solomon.
To the first part, I think for that one I put that I agree with what the staff had said. Just in regard to, before I was on council, when I was about 17, I was talking to a friend at a school thing I was at, and she'd been involved in her local council. She was from a rural local council, and had said to me, I would run, but the meetings are at 2 p.m. in the afternoon, and I was taken aback by that. I think that council has changed it now, but to just conceive of the fact that there might be council meetings happening at 2 p.m. in the afternoon on a Tuesday when the majority of people are working, I can see the huge impact that would have on all kinds of demographics. And I think it was actually reflected in there who was elected to their council. So I agree with that part.
A lot of regional councils have their council meetings during the day because they're all retired, and they don't. And I'm not sure what Wakefield does because they've got some younger members in their council, but yeah, a lot of councils, Barossa. I think Barossa tried to change it to the evening, and I think they were successful. Were they successful?
I understand. Yeah, I think they were. I think they do now. I understand there's some councils who, particularly those really rural councils where it takes a couple hours for some people to travel in. I think there's probably other ways to address that in terms of technology and things. As well, you're always going to have trouble with those councils.
Well,
so even if it's just metropolitan councils,
it might be worth adding a point that council meetings should be. You can zoom in. It is harder to remember to look and look here, look there when you're chairing. However, council meetings are exempt from Zoom meetings. And that might be something to, add.
You could work nuance into it, so it doesn't need to be in the Act. It could be in a regulation where you've got a nuanced approach, and if you're in a council which has a town centre which is, 100 kilometres from where one of the wards is, then of course make that allowance for Zoom in there, and then they can find a really nuanced approach to that, I think.
Yeah.
But yeah, it does affect, I think when meetings does really affect who can be on that council.
Okay, Paul, yep, sorry.
Interestingly, you can Zoom in for committee meetings.
Yeah, you can.
But not for council. And
No, you can't.
I think it should be for council as well, because there are times where you might be away.
That's right.
Read your agenda and everything else.
Well,
and with this technology here, I
if
can
you
Zoom
look
in
at
anywhere,
David
really.
Hughes, if you look at David Hughes, he's over on the York Peninsula. He works over there, and he comes back. He comes back for council meetings.
Yeah.
So he could be zooming in.
Yeah,
He could be zooming in.
Yeah, 'cause I was lucky once that I was in the York Peninsula doing something, and the legislation hadn't changed, and I was able to Zoom in for a council meeting. So I'd read all the agenda while I was away, and I could Zoom in. And
I don't understand why they've split those two committee meetings and council meetings. That doesn't make any sense to me. It makes no sense whatsoever. It doesn't.
you still represent the community.
Yeah.
This makes
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, I think this is about a submission that we're doing, and I think Zoom meetings for council meetings should be included in this. The timing of council. Sorry.
Zooming is completely different to what we're talking about here as the federal government and that sort of stuff. We know they're getting paid massive dollars and travel allowances to go to these meetings sort of thing. So, we're only a small group of 10 people here trying to do our best, whether we're sick or away for work and trying to manage into it.
Yeah, that's true. That is very, very true. And I think council meetings should be included. So, okay. Are there other efforts that council could make to increase interest in standing over a council term, e.g. by working with ratepayer or other community organisations? Council worked closely with the young people from the area through the Youth Advisory Committee. A few past members of council youth were nominated and were successful. This has been positive for council, resulting in diversity of age of council members, increased awareness of local government amongst the youth, and encouraged other YAC members to nominate. This does not address the other areas of underrepresentation, Indigenous, multicultural, women. Yeah, well, there's only 2 women on here. How do we, are there other efforts? So they're looking for other efforts. What are the other efforts? It's not saying that this does not address the other areas of underrepresentation. What are the other efforts that we can do to encourage people? Well, I think super, more money, because people look at what you get paid and they're not interested. And the fact that you don't get super is a real disincentive. It's an absolute disincentive, because you cannot, you're busy working, paying your mortgage, paying whatever it is that you're paying, going on holidays, etc., having children, and that's and I know that most men are equal partners in care for children now. However, it goes to the heart of why we're not getting good representation. Oh, hello. I'll go to you next, Ethan.
Yeah, I wanted to mention maybe an earlier run on, because we sort of start recruiting for council like a few months out, you know,
Yeah.
but it would be nice if, you know, a year out, 2 years out, we were having, here's how the council works stuff, or things that can help people, because, you know, even for the Youth Advisory Committee, the getting that knowledge on how things actually work doesn't come through the committee. That comes through me sending them information. You know, but you know, there's a lot of stuff of just sort of like, because it doesn't spell out like, here's what the allowances you'll get, here's how many hours you'll need to spend doing this, here's how the council system works. Does it have wards? Doesn't it have wards? If you run, there's a whole bunch of information on that front that isn't really covered. And then there's a bunch of stuff that like people need more run-in time to prepare themselves a lot of the time. And so if they had some confidence, you know, a year out or 2 years out or whatever, oh, I understand how council meetings work, or like I feel like we just sort of advertise when it's time for an election, but we don't really prep people.
Well, I remember talking to Councillor Hennessy about getting community engagement sessions. Remember that? Yes. Yeah, and we had to push to get those community engagement sessions. Had to push really hard. So I think that's a really good idea. I think that. And I'm sure everyone agrees that, you know, doing something, you know, maybe this year and doing some community engagement sessions, that might be something to consider. So we could put that in there, Susie. I think that, yeah, you're writing that down? Yes. I'll go to Ethan because you were wanting to speak.
Yeah, I just think are there other efforts that councils could do? Yeah, I think this applies for both candidates but also general community engagement, which we talked about earlier. You know, potentially, you know, councils don't necessarily have a lot of money lying around, but if there was funding from state government dedicated for engagement in the community, whether that is leading up to an election, running some really engaging workshops with candidates, just engagement workshops in general when we're consulting on things, just about how local government works, etc. I think that could be a potential suggestion to say, hey, look, if the state government want to increase engagement and they want to increase diversity in everyone that interacts with councils, well, hey, maybe you need to cough up a little bit, and each council will dedicate that to some form of community engagement. So does that kind of make sense where I'm sort of coming from? I think, and that, again, like we all know that those communities, you know, Indigenous people from different backgrounds, women, young people, etc., all underrepresented. But I think that's not just at that's not only at the representation level, but also actually, you know, there's a select, it's no secret, there's a certain demographic of people that come and speak to councils and are passionate about issues, and that's fantastic, and I love that. But I think this point also refers to, okay, how do we get those other people engaged as well? So my suggestion would be, I don't know how we could write it, but resources provided to councils specifically for engagement. I think maybe something like that. I don't know.
From the state government?
Yeah. Again, we could put it in there if you want. Obviously, there's no promises, but I think not a...
Well, if you ask, if you don't ask, you don't get. So I think it's important to put that in. Councillor Solomon?
I think it's a reflection, and it sort of bounced off what Councillor White just said, but the thing that made me aware of what local government does, or it was strangely a reaction to a really negative policy that was taken to a state election, which was rate capping. And we had that really brilliant campaign, was the Part of Your Everyday campaign, which was run by the LGA. And that's the first time I felt like I actually understood what local government was. And I think that was, things like that are really positive, and there's a lot of areas that people have interest in they potentially don't know about. You don't think about A lot of people don't think about things like, you know, climate change until we had the Climate Emergency Action Plan here. And then you see that real interest start to form. And a lot of people in a lot of councils across the state didn't know that was a possibility, that you could do something like that, that things like waste management have such a huge impact on the environment. There's so many people interested in the environment that don't understand what the role of local government is, and if they did, I think they'd be really interested. So I think some of those, like those educational campaigns like that were really effective. And it's a lot easier with youth engagement, but I went to a summit, I was invited to a summit as a councillor who's under 25 to speak to school children, school-aged children about being involved in local government earlier last year. And that was fantastic because there were so many people who went away and they learnt, there was a session about how to do a deputation, and there were so many brilliant ideas about things people want to advocate for. And they became aware during this summit that these are areas which are covered by local government, and these are things that I'm going to go and ask for. And I thought that was fantastic. So, and I know that that was run by Onkaparinga, actually, and it got a grant from the LGA. But I think, you know, if state government's willing to give money towards those kind of things, or the LGA's got funding available for that in the future, I think that's something that, and not just an Adelaide CBD centric one, because that is a struggle, is that you get these sessions happening in the CBD and not necessarily other areas.
Brian?
Yeah, Mayor Karen, I hear very loud and clear what Isaac saying. That we've got to promote ourselves, pat ourselves on the back and do things. And we're involved at the present moment. The community, half the community would not know how much this council talks about and approves of money to run big events. Fantastic. When you get a headline on a newsletter that goes all over South Australia, we pay for that Christmas carols. Soon as I heard that this was going, I'm a life member, proudly a life member of the Apex Club, I rang and said, what in the hell what are you doing? You can't can it now. Oh, we've got nowhere to run it. I then rang Bryce. Is the rec centre going to be used? Because we used it one other year. No, but why, what's wrong? Oh, well, it's been canned because they're worried about that. Made no effort to do it, and we put the money up for it. This here ad in the paper was totally disgusting. Totally disgusting for somebody that's worked here for 10 years. And that's the worst bit of publicity ever. I won't tell you the words. You'd have to do a lot of beeping of what I rang the owner of the Bunyip in Renmark and the local here. That is ridiculous. We must respect each other and what we do and so forth. Publicity like this, I applaud. It's fantastic. It's promoting people. We're all working together. And this is what that says there. But if we don't get through to these people that, like, for instance, now the movie is coming up at the swimming pool, which is, what, this week or sometime, and so forth, we're paying for it. And I think we're talking about money, Isaac, at the moment, but we're taking money out of Sharon's bin and that sort of thing, and she won't give us any more. So we've got to make some hard decisions. And I've always been against the fringe and the money that's being spent. It's going to happen Friday night. We have to look at all these things because we ain't got the money to just say, oh, she's right, we'll sponsor that. Hell, what do you want to do next? You know, here's another $5,000. And I think that's when young people are going to look and think, well, I want to be on council because that's really good. We're making sure that we're not going to pay extra rates. Martin, the CEO of the Barossa Council, you probably, Paul would know him, and all them. What he's done up there is turn that council around. And I say that proudly because I know him really well and so forth. And for a long time, I think we should look at those that have moved things around and so forth and try and get them to come, especially now we're looking at a new direction and so forth, and say, well, how did you turn it around? Because they will share it. And we need to make sure that we're not just handing out money to run events and things like that and then get headlines in a paper that goes all over Australia. They canned it. That's bloody terrible. We can't do nothing about the weather and that sort of stuff, but support has got to be given where the money is being spent. I really believe that. Thank you.
End of sermon. Do you want to move it up, Sharon? Okay, would councils get a better local result if they make greater investments in local promotion and initiatives, particularly ahead of election periods? Council believes residents would prefer the budget, which is largely comprised of revenue generated, be directed to and used to fund initiatives, upgrades and projects that provide a greater tangible benefit. The Town of Gawler community has a high level of interest in council matters, including elections, and there hasn't been any issues in attracting more candidates than required. While council needs to be mindful of budget constraints, council has an important role to play in promoting local elections. I agree with that. Well, I think we can do more. I think that we can have more, like you said, Cody, you know, this year, doing something. Would councils get a better local result if they made greater investments in local promotion and initiatives, particularly ahead of election periods? And I think that that's a yes. Sure, but you're constrained by your budget. However, needs to be mindful of budget constraints. Council has an important role to play in promoting local elections. Yeah, I think that's absolutely correct. Well, we usually have at least 25, and on average we have 25. We have 25. No, well, look.
I think it goes, sorry, go back to community engagement. How can we sit back and say we only get a third of our residents voting if we're not actively promoting it? And just saying, oh, it costs too much, so we're not going to tell you about it, is not genuine community engagement. And I don't think it needs to be huge amounts of budget spent on it, but it has to be an important part of our marketing campaign. So we market Norma, and we market the swimming pool, and we market that. We have to have a strategy, a time strategy, and as the Deputy Mayor says, it's not the 6 weeks in front of the council elections. It needs to be a campaign that seriously is part of marketing the role local government plays, and get beyond the 3 Rs, look into some, you know, some stuff that is much more interesting to the diverse groups that we're missing, and do that. So that was my point there, because while we get lots of candidates, I'm not sure we're getting the voting.
Well, we've always had 30%. We've always had 30%. Yeah.
I think one of the points that I would emphasise here is that right before an election is probably it's good to do things around the election. I think you need to do things around the election. You need to have those candidates forms, and we should never get rid of those. But I think doing everything right before an election rather than spreading it out, it might be counterproductive as well. If we want to engage people, we need to be engaging people in what council does earlier on, I think, because you only, to me, some of those things are only going to attract some people and some demographics of people, and I think if we're going to invest in that, it needs to be more consistent across, and not just huge investments prior to an election.
Well, a lot of people make their decision well before 6 months before an election. They've made their decision at least 12 or 2 years before their election. So, yeah. So they, you know, I think that Deputy Mayor's right, that we need to bring it forward so council has an important role to play in promoting local elections. The ideas that, so full stop, the ideas of bringing marketing and communication to the community to the halfway point of council, and then do some stuff there. But you also have to promote the election. But it really, I had great difficulty getting 2 community engagement sessions. It was really difficult to get, but we got them. But it was really difficult to get. So we need to start thinking earlier, and I agree with you.
Yeah, I agree with all that. I think our answer should be yes. I do take the staff's point. I feel like maybe we should add a part that says, however, if state government wants us to ever increase our workloads, then they should give us money, in nicer words, but they sort of ever increase the amount of things that local government is responsible for, and then complain that our rates are too high, and then start campaigns about our rates. And I think, I understand why the staff has pointed that out there, like we do. This is an extra investment every council would have to make. So the state government should, fund it if they want it.
So Susie's busily writing, and you will send this around to us. Is that what you're hoping to do, Susie?
I guess based on the fact that the ministers extended the date, whether or not a draft would come.
Yeah.
I'm in the hands of members and yourself, Mayor Redmond, whether or not members wanted a draft to be put together, which could make the meeting and still have a few days for you to sign off on it post that meeting.
So we could have a timeline. Susie could send around a draft with all these extra bits put in, and you could provide feedback, and then we could send it off. Yep. Okay, should people be required to complete an online course before nominating? LGA create a generic version to which local content can be added. The local content is really, really important because local government is about local issues. It's not about state issues, it's not about federal issues, it's about local issues. So a generic version to which local content can be added. Yeah. Any other comments on this one here? Yes? Yeah? What?
That implies that it's something you're going to be assessed on. I think this needs to be more...
Complete an online course before nominating. You'd like online activity? Okay. All right. Okay. Thank you. We'll keep, any other comments? Oh, yes, certainly.
One of the things with our community, I really believe, when things are going really good, everybody knows about it and all, and then all of a sudden they forget, and they don't know that Mick is an honourable elected member, or Helen, or whoever. Yeah, I'm picking on you now, Mick. Now, every time the rates go out, I have asked for a simple flyer, which is that big, that's got all the elected members on. It's been refused every time. And you know what? It doesn't cost any more money to put in the envelope to send out. That's what we should be making sure, that every time an account goes out, like the rates, that's in there, so they can see Cody and Ethan's smiling faces and things like that. Oh, that's our elected member. All I see a lot lately, and people I talk to, I had a fella come to fix up me telly today, And he said to me, "Oh, Nathan Shank's doing a fantastic job, isn't it great? You know, he's there and everything." I said, "How do you know Nathan?" "Oh, well, every now and then he flicks me an email and stuff like that and so forth. But we don't seem to get any information from the council anymore. But I know that Nathan's doing a good job as a councillor. There's no reason why that simple flyer, you'd all know, you've had one, couldn't be in everything. We've got to promote ourselves, and we are not doing that. I do not believe that that is being done. And we deserve to be promoted. We don't deserve to get all the phone calls, but we do, and so forth. So I just wanted to say that, because I can't understand why a simple thing like that, put it in. We got our rates the other day. Yep, no worries. What did it have? This. I'm thinking, what a lot of crap. You know, I'm sorry, that's my opinion.
Okay,
You know?
thank you, Brian. Okay, should people, so we've done that, we've done the online course, we'll move up. What forms of training could both benefit candidates and generate more community confidence in the people that are standing for election? Financial management to ensure the rates they pay are being spent appropriately, expenditure delivers value for money and funds are not wasted. However, training for candidates on financial management would potentially be counterintuitive, as the time it could take to complete to provide prospective candidates with sufficient knowledge may put people off nominating. Replace with roles and responsibilities, workloads, legal responsibilities, financial and governance knowledge. Yeah.
I read it, and with due reference, Sharon. Didn't you? Oh, I apologise then. I thought, oh, hang on. Why are we focusing on financial management? There's so much more to this. It's an important part of it, absolutely, but I think it's broader than that. So I didn't want it just to focus on financial management, and with due respectful feedback, I think it's too long. It's a commentary. All we need to do is just give some dot points. We don't need to talk about it, whether it's frivolous or whether they would be put off by it. I just think we need to list what we need to do.
I don't like the counterintuitive. I think that's wrong, and I think that we should be training our candidates to be, roles and responsibilities, workloads, legal responsibilities, financial and governance knowledge. Yeah. So the roles and responsibilities of an elected member, I just don't like the counterintuitive. I don't like that at all. I prefer the whole paragraph not here. So we could put just dot points, just dot points. Roles and responsibility, you could just have the dot points up there. Yep, got that. Okay. Yeah, if you apply again for board and you look at what they want, that's what they do. They just set out what's entitled in the board role, down to some depth. I've always thought for years and years and years that candidates should actually put a bit of a CV up to explain to the community how they think they have those type of loads of skill, those skills. So they understand what the role's about thoroughly, and then they address how they're going to bring their knowledge to these things. So anyway, I just prefer the dot points. Okay, we'll keep, yes, Ethan?
Mayor, just briefly, I'll be interested to see what the LGA's response is in whole, but a number of things tonight have come up, which I think this is a sector-wide, things can be consolidated, they already are. For example, before the elections in 2022, I attended a half-day training for free, which the LGA ran in town, and it covered all of these things, and it was fantastic. And yes, admittedly, there was about 50 people there, which still was quite good at the time. But maybe, I think a lot of these things, I understand why they're questions in the discussion paper, but a lot of this stuff is already getting achieved to some extent. I think it comes back down to that promotion and engagement, and maybe making it compulsory for candidates, those sort of things. So,
well, I think you need to do it a bit earlier.
Do a bit earlier. Yeah, I think my training was in July, by memory. So what's that? 4 months before the election. So it is there. I think, but I just think there's lots of these questions. I go, this is really great. I'm happy for the town of Gawler to give our opinion, but I think we should also see what the LGA put out as well? Because I think there's some
I
sector-wide.
think what we're doing is providing a submission from ourselves, from our perspective. So that's our submission. So the LGA will collate all of this and, yeah.
Now, the LGA's done theirs.
The LGA.
Have they done theirs? Have they
So
done
the
theirs?
reason a staff response was formulated, and I think council resolved the wording in principle supports the administration submitting that, was because the LGA deadline was the 9th of February. And so this is for the submission to the actual Office of Local Government, to the discussion paper itself.
Okay. All right. Let's keep moving.
Yep.
If EXA continues to receive nominations directly, should there be a requirement for nominations to be published throughout the nomination process, not just at the end? If so, how should these be published? For area councils, no reason for nomination to be withheld. The Town of Gawler understands there's issues historically in some ward councils when nominations were previously published through the nomination period. It may be appropriate for two different approaches to be prescribed. Remove second and third paragraph. Add, they should be published in real time and relayed via council website. This will increase public interest and participation. So you want the two, the second and third. Understands there's issues historically. It may be appropriate for two different approaches to be prescribed in relation. Yeah. The publishing of nominations for area councils to be published in real time. Yeah.
The rest is hearsay. I was here during that whole period. I think that's one opinion. People have other opinions in our community. I think we just need to say a very short response to this.
Yeah. There's no reason for nominations to be withheld until the end of the nomination period and published only once nominations have closed. Okay. Yes?
I know of people that were elected by the ward system and they put the nomination in 5 or 12 because no one else nominated that ward. They didn't even hear that ward and they just walked in.
And tell me why that's a problem.
Well,
Have they now got a representative?
Yeah, that's fine. I'm just saying that's the
It's the small pig politics that happens, but I think you need to step back and go, if the point is to have representatives, then you need to allow them, and if somebody's not confident and thinks, oh, there's a few people, I'll throw my hat in, that's good. They still could end up being a really quality, their lack of confidence in themselves doesn't mean they wouldn't be a good candidate.
I'll go to Sharon. I'll go to Sharon. There you go.
I think with the ward system as well is that when you have wards, I think from a community perspective, there's an expectation that the person that's representing the ward actually lives in that ward, whereas what's happening potentially is that you're then getting, like, so if there's a particular ward that a person lives in and there's 4 candidates, what they will tend to do is to sit there and say, I don't think I'm going to get in there, or I'm going to represent, I'm going to go into another ward just to get in there. So I think that's probably the reason why it was objected, is because that was happening, and I know that happened.
People expect people to live in the wards.
In the ward, because especially with a ward system, they do expect that, to sit there and say, I'm voting for my ward representative, and I don't feel and as a community, some people don't feel as though, will they represent me if they're not in living in the area?
I'll go to you, Councillor Solomon, and then to Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. I think there's a really easy solution to that, and it's to make it mandatory to live in your ward if you want to run there. I don't think that necessarily, I don't think it has to be addressed in this sort of weird roundabout way.
No.
If that's what people want, give them that. But I don't think there's any actual problem with the real-time nominations. I can understand in some other councils it might be a problem. So we don't have wards here, so I'm not going to pass judgment on those councils that do have wards. Though, I mean, the Bunyip, anyone in the last election could have gone to the Bunyip. We had at least all the mayoral candidates announced quite publicly that they were running well prior to the election. So I don't think there's no issues here at the moment. But that being said, don't see
Yeah.
any reason why we can't just publish them as they come.
Okay. Thank you for that. Deputy Mayor?
Yeah, and it's not just about the wards. The Electoral Commission created significant extra expense for themselves this time around because there were several councils with, there were 10 spots for council and 1 spot for mayor. 15 people ran for council, no one ran for mayor because they were all playing a game of chicken with each other, and then they had to go out to another election.
Yeah, they
and that would have been solved by people being able to see who's nominated.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Any other comments? No? Should voting for councils be compulsory? I think it should be compulsory, but there's probably varied views around the table. Compulsory voting in local government elections has merit. Mandatory voting would bring the council election system in line with compulsory voting requirements of state and federal government elections. However, compulsory voting would come, it may not come at an unknown cost. And because of this, the town of Gawler cannot support mandatory voting, as it is a reasonable assumption that the costs associated with this change would be significant. Well, if it's still postal voting, it won't be any extra cost. And, in the referendum, it's $20 if you don't vote. $20. $20. So our my stepmother-in-law, who's in care, they didn't do anything. She didn't vote in the state government election, and she didn't vote in local government elections, and she didn't vote in the referendum. They didn't do a thing. So it really, and so she's got multiple fines that she's got to pay. Well, no, she's quite alert. She's very alert, and I think that they should have done something. They should have done something in aged care facilities. Now, some people don't have the capacity to vote. I get that. However, some people do. So I don't think that they should just take a hands-off approach and not have voting in aged care facilities. I don't think that's right. So, what do people think about compulsory voting? I'll go around the table. I'll start with you, Paul.
Does this open it up for party political campaigns?
It could be.
Because we're all independents, but if it's independent, not party political, but does this open up for parties to dominate?
Well, they could run a ticket.
Yeah, run tickets basically.
Or they do that in New South Wales. You have to be aligned with either the National Party, the Labor Party, or the Liberal Party, or the Greens, and it happens in Victoria as well.
Yeah. I mean, I would think that would be a backward step for local government in South Australia myself. And people know where you sit, in the spectrum of things.
Yeah, I don't know. We'll work around the table. What are your views, Ethan?
Thanks, Mayor. I'll start off. My personal views is I think it should be compulsory, and I think it should be held on the same date as the state election, and therefore that you can kill two birds with one stone. That's just my personal view.
They pay for it. Oh, awesome! That'd be fantastic.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't know if that's where Councillor Solomon's coming from there, but potentially I see where he's coming from. I think just with our submission, this is obviously a huge topic and a huge debate, and there won't even be consensus with just the 10 of us. But I think maybe saying that we cannot support it, I'd rather almost stay neutral. I think it would be better to stay neutral and maybe say that compulsory voting, yes, would bring council in line and blah, 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 blah. We definitely support further information being gathered, including how it would work, who would pay for it, would it be postal, would it be at a polling booth? But I feel very uncomfortable. This council knows about taking positions prematurely, too early. I definitely feel very uncomfortable with saying, the town of Gawler does not support mandatory voting at the moment because
Well,
exactly.
I think we
Councillor
need to sit
Hennessy,
on the fence.
Yeah, I'm not normally one for
think-
sitting on the fence, but I think here it's
However,
way too early for us
So
to make
let's see if we can
definitive-
change. However, compulsory voting would
But happy to hear
would
everyone's
come
thoughts.
at
Happy
an
to hear everyone's thoughts too. though.
unknown cost, and because of this, the town of Gawler cannot support. I think that we. How do we word this, Susie? Oh yeah, you could. You could just take it out. Just take it out. Take it out. Yep. And we'll just take it out. What do you think? Take it out? Which sentence, however, compulsory voting would become an unknown cost, and because of this, the town of Gawler cannot support mandatory voting. That sentence. As it is a reasonable assumption that the costs associated with this change would be significant. We don't know that. We don't know that it would be significant. So we'll just take it out, and we don't have an opinion. What's your view?
Yeah, I mean, well, to be honest, I'd be happy to just submit Councillor Solomon's statement on its own.
State government should pay. Yeah, no, that's perfect.
It's
They're not going to pay.
but
They're not going to pay.
yeah, look, I mean, look, Councillor White's suggestion is something that, like, America goes to every election at once. Like, you get a piece of paper and it's like, who do you want to be your water commissioner? Who do you want to be the district judge? The sheriff?
Oh, really?
Yeah, so they just have,
Yeah.
so that, and the issue they have is that the turnout is high on when it coincides with presidential elections, and it's
Yeah.
moderately high when it coincides with state elections, but then on years when it's separated from the other elections, their turnout's like 10% or whatever. They have it, you know, because
they don't
it's optional there, but they encourage participation by combining it at the same time as a bigger election that they might care more about. And so there's always the biggest turnout for local elections is always at the presidential level elections in America. So that's a completely different system than we have, but that's sort of an example case. Personally, I would be interested in looking into compulsory voting, but I agree that I don't think we need to have an official council view on this at this time.
So
aside from that, if there's extra expenses, that the state government should pay for it.
Yeah, great. I don't think they will, but yeah, we can ask. We can ask.
I think, like Councillor White said, I'm personally in favour of compulsory voting, and there is that petition as well that Councillor Shetler from West Torrens sent to us, and he's been on my case.
Yeah,
We used to work
yeah,
together,
yeah.
so he's been on my case about that one. So there's that if people do want to sign it as well. To Councillor Kosh's point, I agree. I don't particularly like the idea of political parties in local government elections. I mean, I'm a proud member of the ALP, and I'm happy to have that listed on there, but I don't want 5 people in a local sub-branch of a political party to be pre-selecting candidates for a local government election. I think that's the wrong way to go about it. I mean, in saying that, I'm not sure. It's hard because the examples aren't plentiful, but I think that, in WA, I think they have political parties and they don't have compulsory voting either, and they still run tickets. So it's one of those things which I agree, we probably shouldn't have political party involvement. And when we say political party involvement, it's not even directly from political parties as such. A lot of state governments disown these candidates as they come through. But I don't necessarily know that compulsory voting would result in that, but I think it's important consideration for the state government to take into account. In saying what I said there with state government should pay, we're not a form of government under the Constitution. Not to say we're not valid for any sovereign citizens who might be listening, but we're not a form of government under the Constitution. We are an establishment of state government, and we're quite restricted in what we can do because of that. Sometimes state government likes to complain about councils, and look, and sometimes that's justified, but sometimes investing in that and having the ability to say, we want elections where we have really high quality candidates and larger involvement from the community would actually result in councils that are making better, more accountable decisions, and then we should support that by funding that. And I think that's a reasonable expectation, that if state government wants councils to do better, state government's able to put their money where their mouth is and say, if we're going to have compulsory elections, we should support that financially. That's my view of why I put that pay,
Okay.
state government should pay in there.
Okay. Thank you for that. Any other comments? No? Oh, yes.
I think we
sorry.
haven't, three of us haven't expressed an opinion yet. I'm going to express the opinion that I actually don't believe in mandatory voting. If we are looking for quality candidates and an increased participation, making it compulsory is not necessarily going to do that. I am also concerned about the threat of party politics occurs, as you say, whether we do have mandatory or not, but I think there's that problem. We are different, as Councillor Solomon has said. We can't just keep saying we would want what the state and federal. And certainly running it with a state election, while it might be more cost effective, I think we'll actually lose the focus of local government. I think people will be so concentrated on the state that we'll lose. I think that's a disincentive for people to pay attention to local government.
Yes, Mick.
I pretty much agree with Councillor Hennessy there. I'm not totally, it has the merits of being compulsory, so we're going to get the numbers and people engagement in it. Working into a local community and the likes, in my personal belief, it's going to come down to more of people, oh shit, we've got to go do this. I want to vote for the guy that looks like a Viking because I don't care about the rest of them, sort of thing. I think it's going to take away the actual authenticity of it, of the people that are really going to take care on who's in there and who's available. So, you know, I've got to have a heap of people voting for me, and what for? Just because they don't know and don't care, so they've got to vote for someone. It takes away the actual real root cause of having people in the community representing them. So.
Thank you. Okay, so we've got divergent views around the table. I think it is important to take that sentence out, and state government should pay, absolutely. Okay. Yeah. So, we'll move up. Should councils have a stronger role in promoting elections locally to increase voter turnout? Yeah, I think... Sorry? Preface by saying that this is fundamental to council's role to engage with its community, yeah. Following the 222, there was discussion that promotional materials used to encourage people to vote not being reflective of... They weren't reflective of local communities, and I think that having promotional materials branded in the same style and format provides consistency, but it also, it's bland, and it doesn't show your local community. And I think you can have templates, and you can adjust that to your local community. It is difficult to have templates. We did that with the Australian Local Government Association, and they were used for local areas to promote their issues. And I think that might be something to consider. This is fundamental to council's role to engage with its community, and I think an option may be for EXA to provide templates such as advertisements so they have the same look and feel across the sector, but allowing councils to tailor. Yeah, I think that's right. This involves significant staff resources to prepare. So that's the other issue, you know, staff we ask staff to provide that look and feel for our local community. Is that appropriate to ask staff to do that? You know, I think, well, yeah. Well, you really want to vet the template to make sure that you've got the texture of your local community. Yeah. To prepare and funding to cover the postage costs. Although anecdotal, there are examples where this process has been undertaken by councils and has not achieved an increase to the number of non-resident ratepayers applying to enrol on the supplementary roll. Yeah, okay. Any other questions? Susie, is that the last one? Oh, what information should candidates be required to include with their nominations? What? You've written an essay. You've written an essay, Councillor Solomon.
Apologise. Yeah, no, I apologise for that essay there. I thought it might be summarised, and I was probably quite blunt in there, actually. Yeah, no, I appreciate that, and that was silly of me to think that would be. But that one, I think that's the one information that goes back to the point I made at the council meeting originally, that it should either be you declare your employment or don't declare your employment. I think that the point there, I think it risks being, I understand allegiance to a political party. I completely 100% agree that should be listed there. If you are a member of a political party, if you're active in a local political party, that should be listed. This is about employment specifically. If you are a person who has a particular interest in, in wine and wants to be an advisor to a minister in PIRSA, to me, you should not be discriminated against for that purpose. There's other elements that people might want to know about if you're seeking to be elected to local government. If you're working for a developer who has an interest in the town and you're running on a platform which is similar to that, I would like to know that as well. If you're, if you're railing against the Climate Emergency Action Plan and you happen to work for BHP, relevant information. So I think either we take it as an approach where you declare your employment as a whole, or you don't declare anything at all, just to make it fair, and because I don't think it actually captures what the sentiment of that should be, which is, if you're an advisor or you're an admin trainee, like I was for Tony Piccolo some years ago, that's not really relevant, because you're not acting in a political role, and you're certainly not acting in a role which relates to the electorate which you're based in and the local issues that you would be deciding on council. However, there are local issues which may be impacted by employment for more than just a member of parliament. So that's the sort of nuance I was seeking to get in there.
Well, with the 200-word words that you put in on the EXA site, that doesn't give you a lot of room to move. Doesn't give you a lot of room to move, and you really have to be very, very efficient with your words, and you have to use semicolons and lots of lists basically, because you just don't get 200 words is not really enough to promote your background.
In terms of declarations, I think as well, something which might be an idea is that rather than publishing it in a booklet or something, is that we all do ordinary returns as soon as we get elected to council. You could just require that we do it before the election, because we have to provide it afterwards if we get elected anyway. Yeah. So I guess that's what I'm saying, is either provide an ordinary return prior to the election, everyone can see it, or just leave it as it is.
Okay. Remove first paragraph, change second paragraph to disagree with need for national police check unless there is an independent legal assessment made as to what is relevant to an elected member's role.
When I read this, I thought I was actually a bit astounded, and our response felt quite fishy to me. I don't understand the political party. I've done some research into that, and I do understand it is coming from a particular spot in the local government association. either we all, like Councillor Solomon, that either we all have to list our employment or we don't do employment at all. I don't think you particularly go for people working in political parties. That's ridiculous. It's discriminatory. I quite like the solution that Councillor Solomon. I'd have no problems in part of my application process saying who I've worked for the last 10 years. That's not a problem for me. The National Police Check is a very blunt and often misused instrument. So my point is, if we're going to go down that track, and I don't understand why people want to do it, can we have a define as what is relevant to elected members? There is a ruling that once you've served your time in our society, you're done and you can move on. There are some categories that are still so if I want to work with children and I have that type of thing.
Yeah, that's right.
But like define that for an elected member, please, because if I have to tell you that I jaywalked when I was 17, is that relevant? Is that relevant in part of my, and I'm being facetious.
If you haven't got a conviction.
Yeah, well, whatever. It's such a blunt instrument and I don't understand why it's been brought in. If you want to say, here are 4 things that if you've been convicted for, you need well, maybe that's the case, but this is not worthwhile.
I think it's a case-by-case basis, and some people have done their time in prison, and I think that for our marginalised community members, they might feel quite put off by that. And I don't agree that a national police check is going to weed out, who makes a good elected member, because a lot of marginalised communities, a lot of people from poor communities end up in prison. They end up in prison because they can't get good legal representation. They can't. And they end up in prison for no fault of their own, and they're marginalised for the rest of their lives. So why are we discriminating against them? So I think that it really depends on whether you're working with children. That's a separate thing. That needs to be worked through. And also, vulnerable communities as well. So, yeah, it is.
In my role as an elected member, I don't have any control over finance. I don't work with children. I don't work with... I sit in a room 8 or 9 times a month and I'm making decisions. So tell me what criminal offences are relevant to that would make me ineligible to do.
I'm not an expert in the law.
No, I know, but that's my point. Is somebody needs to define it because,
well,
it's silly.
It marginalises people from poor communities, and that's not what we should be about. That's not what we should be about. I don't agree with that. However, if they're working with children, that's a separate issue. That's a separate issue. You need, all volunteers need to have working with, children. And I go to the Youth Advisory Committee meetings. I work with the chair of the committees. So it really is important that I've got, and I have it through my work anyway. I have to have it. So yeah, it's an interesting question. It's an interesting question. Why? And it was raised with me from somebody from an Aboriginal point of view that they were discriminated against. They were discriminated against, and that's not okay, because you're not going to get people from an Indigenous background coming on council if they've got a conviction. If they've got a conviction. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, it's interesting, Mayor Karen, because so many people, sadly, a number of my mates haven't been as lucky as me with health, and I go to the nursing homes to see them,
Yeah.
and things like that. And I said to the lady up here at, the one up by the hospital, what's that? Southern Cross.
Yeah.
The other day. I said,
Yeah.
oh, how you going? She said, oh, no, Brian, what can you do about saying to people that are retired to come and talk to the people that are there? You know, like I was up seeing Bob Arns today, and that sort of thing. He's up at Southern Cross up here, and his wife is now, well, next door, but she's on care. But
Yeah.
they cannot get volunteers because exactly what Councillor Hennessy is saying.
Yeah.
These people have been in business, and they're people that are,
Yeah.
no, you've got to get a police check, and they're saying, what? You're kidding me. And I'll just go back. When I became mayor, I have never had a police check. Now, I've got a couple of speeding fines for doing
I've had
wheelies.
multiple.
And the first thing they said to me, now that you're a mayor, which they would have said to you, you are now an official JP. So, fill it out, JP. And I was a JP for 6 years, and sadly, because the doctors and other JPs wouldn't go and do do JP duties at the hospital, and in 1 year, Glenys said to me, you've got to stop it, because I was going to the hospitals to allow, them to switch people and watch them die in the room. I said, I can't put this up anymore, because you're a JP, you've got to be there to sign it. So I said no, and then when I came back as a councillor, they said, would you like to come back as a JP? I said, no, thank you, thanks all the same. But I've never had a police check. Okay. Never. So
I've had multiple.
what it worries me,
I get one
we're
every 3
getting
years.
less and less volunteers.
Yeah.
And we've got to help the community, if they can, to get people off the couch and go there and
Off the couch.
Off the couch, yeah, and be a volunteer, because those people love you.
That's a promo point for you, Ethan. Yeah, Paul?
Just with that, I know it's a bit, I don't know how far you have to go, but to be an elected member, this is absolute public scrutiny on you, not only during the election campaign, but your past life. People know everything about you. They will vote for you if they think you're a good and proper person. Yeah, okay. For example, here's an example. I worked at, I won't go into too much detail, I knew a person who ran for council as a mayor.
Yeah.
His nephews, and he was running with it, his nephew said he abused me when I was a child.
Oh, goodness.
He then was on the ballot, got no votes, went to prison, and the local people in that area got their road change, the name changed, because the name was the name after him.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so it's the public scrutiny. I mean, people
Yeah.
know you.
Look, there will always be different views around the table about national police checks. Yeah.
If you've done something, you'll be fair.
Yeah.
Everybody knows you.
Yeah.
You're in the public eye.
Okay. Okay. Is there a role for councils to play in enabling all candidates to reach potential voters? Council should remain impartial in relation to elections. This is vital to ensure the integrity of the process and give voters confidence in the election results. Preface by saying that this is fundamental to council's role to engage with its community. So we're talking about councils to play in enabling all councils to reach potential voters. I think it's fundamental. Yeah. I don't think it's we shouldn't be impartial. We shouldn't be sitting on the fence when it comes to elections. We shouldn't be sitting on the fence.
And I apologise if I'm on a sounding like a scratch record, but that is exactly, we're here to engage the community with us. So, no, it was the impartial thing. It's not talking about impartiality. We need to enable people to communicate with their communities. So I think, and it's interesting, I spent quite a bit of time today talking to some people from Adelaide Plains Council, and again, I'll be careful so I don't identify them. Let me tell you how annoyed that community is with the hands-off approach of their council and allowing the Electoral Commission to run it, because it's all turned out with tears. They are...
Oh, really? I haven't heard that. Yeah.
That's the one where 3 elected members...
Oh, they've resigned. They've resigned. Have they resigned?
Still...
Oh, that's right. That's right. They didn't get in. They didn't get in. They have to do it again.
No, it's actually in the Court of Disputed Returns next week. They are still elected members under the legislation. It is a real mess, but the community has lost faith in the whole election process and wants the council to take it back from the Electoral Commission, or the group I was talking to. It's their council, it's their election, and the state government system has stuffed it up, so they're on a...
They did stuff it up big time, yeah. Councillor Solomon?
I do sort of agree with Councillor Hennessy there that it's probably the right answer to a different question, but it's not asking about impartiality as such. In saying that, I still think prefacing that, you know, for example, if council played an active role in stating who the I don't know if we did that. We're stating who the candidates are, for example, on a Facebook post, that needs to be done in such a way that is impartial. But that's not to say that council can't have a role in doing that, as long as there's an equal distribution of information, and that information is from an impartial source like the Electoral Commission, and it's only replicating what AXA has put out. I think that kind of boundary is good.
Sharon?
I suppose from a council and an administration perspective, I suppose the issue is that term of, like, I get that as a council we should be encouraging and we should be engaging with the community to nominate, but it's that question on what is our role in enabling all candidates to reach potential voters. So it's not necessarily saying it's... yes, we should be engaging in the community to encourage people to nominate, but I think that this is a different question in the sense it's actually effectively, I read that as, is there a role for candidates to actually actively support everyone that's nominated to actually reach the voters?
Well,
which I think is different to engaging with the community. You know,
it's up to the candidates to reach potential voters.
So that's where I'm saying about the fact of, yes, it's fundamental to engage and to encourage, but I don't think that that's what that question is actually asking. I think it's to sit there and say, do we have a role in supporting everyone to enable to get out to the potential voters?
Well, you're actually doing the candidate's job for them. You're doing the candidate's job for them. The candidate's job is to get out and door knock, put up Facebook posts, have a major campaign, you know, social media, etc. But it's not, I don't believe it's the council's role to enable candidates to reach potential voters. It is the council's role to ensure the integrity of the process and give voters confidence in the election results. However, I don't think council should be doing the candidate's job for them. I don't agree with that. Yeah. Hang on. No, you've just turned it off.
Okay, I'll use the example of the electoral roll. And that's actually, candidates can have access to the electoral roll, and that's made very clear in the legislation. So it's not about doing their work for them, I totally agree with that, but it's allowing them to have access to reach out into the community, because Nor people don't know the 23,000 people who live. So to go out door knocking, they need to have those type of tools. Now, it's in one respect because it's already mandated that all candidates can, if they ask, be given the electoral roll. But when I asked, the first offer was, here it is, we'll print it out for you. And I said, no, I want it electronically. That's my preferred method. It had to go away and be thought about, and thankfully it was then delivered to me electronically. That's the type of thing I'm talking about. Council has that role to play.
I agree with that, but that's access to information. Now, we all have opportunity to have access to the electoral roll, and not everyone knows that you can get an electoral roll. I'm hopeful that most people do know that you can get access to electoral rolls. However, it's not the. This is a different question. It's enabling all candidates to reach potential voters. Now, you can get an electoral roll, you can get it electronically, you can get a hard copy. I had a hard copy. I walked around and I studied it, and yeah, it's actually quite useful to reach potential voters. So. I think it's vague. I think it's actually vague because some people will say councils are enabling candidates to reach potential voters, and that's not a council's role. It's council's role to make sure the process has integrity, and also that people have access to electoral rolls, etc. Sharon?
I suppose from my perspective is to sit there and say, I wasn't involved in this election, but the elections where I think from a council's perspective, if the legislation says that you have access to it, and I know from my experience, and I would have expected that same experience for all councils, but obviously it's not, is that I know on the nominations day, we basically had a printed copy and an electronic and a USB with the electronic copy of the voters' roll, because we know that's a legislative requirement, so that's actually so. So I think it is that thing about, yes, from a council has a role in making sure that we fulfil our obligations that we're required to do, but I don't necessarily believe that we should be enabling anything over and above what the legislation requires from an administration perspective, because that also opens up the council to the perception that we might be favouring one candidate over another.
Yeah.
Yep. That's right. But
Cody?
Yeah, so I guess to repeat what everyone's been saying off microphone, the Meet the Candidates Forum is an example of the council enabling all candidates to reach potential voters, and that's something that's not a requirement, and I think there's been, and we don't have to host one, and there's been multiple in the past before, hosted by different people and all that kind of thing, but yeah, I think in that sense, enabling all candidates to reach potential voters by having a Meet the Candidates session or other things that are impartial, that are giving, everyone had their equal, 2 minutes, which was quite a short time to get your speech in, but, everyone equally got that time, for example. I think there's that sort of role, but yeah, there's a lot of stuff that we shouldn't be doing, but I do think that things like the Meet the Candidates are valuable.
Okay, is that the last question? Okay, so I'm going to wrap this up. Well, we'll get a draft that will be sent by Susie around to all of us. We can have a look at it. We'll have a timeline on it. There'll be a deadline to give your feedback. And then we'll send it through. Okay? So we're going to wrap this up. Thank you, everyone, for coming. And we've got 2 special council meetings tomorrow night.